Hello everyone. Today we will talk about the wonderful movie The Maze Runner, the first part, and the entire events of the movie. But before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Let's go. The film begins with Thomas awake on an iron elevator that quickly takes him to a place he does not know. He keeps calling for help from anyone who can help him, until the elevator stops and the roof opens, and they meet many young men in front of him and say, "Welcome to the Glade." And as soon as he comes out, he keeps running around the place until he realizes that he is in a place surrounded by high walls, and there is no way out, and they catch the rest of the young men to throw him. Something similar to a prison cell, and then Albie comes to him and asks for any personal information about him, but Thomas does not remember anything about his life, even his name, and they reassure Albie that the loss of what he has is normal, and it happened to everyone present, and it takes 3 days, and he remembers his name and offers to show him. The place makes him understand its story, and Albie tells him that everyone there was like him, and he had no idea why or who brought them. But in the end, they adapted to life in the place, and the box that appeared in it, which they call a box, comes to them from an unknown place once a month, in which there is food, drink, and supplies, and in it is a person. New, and this person is always in the same situation as you. And he does not remember who he is, and they go out together to a tower made of wood, and Albie explains to him that the 3 most important laws in the place. It is that everyone does his role, and there is no time for laziness, and we cannot hurt each other because we need trust between us, and it is forbidden to cross the walls for any final reason. And then Thomas goes to Chuck, who shows him the place where he is sleeping, and he also warns him that he should never leave the walls. And he sees 2 men named Ben and Mino coming from outside the walls, and he asks Chuck about what they were doing, and he tells him that they are runners in the maze, because they are the fastest people in the place. And Thomas tries to understand the maze they are talking about, and goes towards the entrance to the maze, and thinks that he will get out until he finds Gailey pushes him to the ground. An entrance, and he tells him that no one is even allowed to approach the entrance. But Thomas gets angry and keeps asking them for an explanation of what is happening and what is outside, and why they prevent him from leaving, until suddenly he finds that the door of the maze is locked for one person, and tells him that next time he will let him out if he wants, and they will all welcome him. He is in the place they are in, which is called the forest. Until night comes, and Newt, who is in charge of the forest, goes to talk to Thomas and tells him that the first day is always the hardest day, and he begins to understand that what is outside this stupidity is a huge and wide maze, and it remains dangerous after the doors close, because you can't go outside the forest after closing the gate, otherwise he will die and not come back. There are people responsible for exploring the maze, and their name is the Runners, and their boss is Mino, and their job is that they go out every day as soon as the gate is opened and look for the way to get out of it. And for 3 years they have been trying and have not found a way out of it. And this is because the maze changes every day at night, and they lost runners before in the maze at night, because there are creatures outside that remain free after the gate closes. Their name is the Grievers, and they are the ones who killed the runners, but no one knows what they look like because the one who saw them died, who is with them in the forest. Among them are the builders, who are considered the strongest people in the forest because they use their muscles to build and lift. There is someone responsible for food and shelter, and someone responsible for taking care of the injured. Thomas tells him that he wants to remain a runner. But before he finishes his words, he finds that Gailey is offering him to participate in the game against him. The rules of the game are simple, which are that he prefers to be inside the circle on the ground, and if he leaves it, he loses and faces each other, and Gailey continues to hit him and knock him down in front of everyone present until he becomes confused in his head and remembers his name is Thomas, and he is happy that finally remembered something, and the rest of the guys celebrate with him, and it is time for bed. And after Thomas wakes up the next day, Albie comes to him to make him carve his name around him like the rest of the guys. There are people whose name is crossed out, and he knows that they are dead. Albie tries to beware of his curiosity, because curiosity is the beginning of chaos and problems. Then they send them to Newt to help them with farming, and Thomas inquires about whether there is a way for them to climb the fence, but Newt tells him briefly so that his brain does not tire out thinking that there is no way for them to get out of the forest except through the maze. He asks him to go collect fertilizer for the planting, and Thomas goes into the trees to collect the fertilizer that he finds. But he is surprised that Ben is the runner behind him and looks strange, and tells him that he will kill him and attack him to suffocate him. And they keep saying that he is the reason, but Thomas is able to escape from him. He continues to call for help from anyone to save him from Ben before they kill him, and all the young men run towards him, including Newt, who hits Ben, and they bend on him to pin him to the ground and uncover his body. And they find that there are traces of insinuations on his body, and Albie orders them to put Ben in the hole until the gate is no longer locked. Outside the forest, because it is dangerous for them, and Gailey goes to cross out Ben's name, not being careful like the rest. They all go back to sleep, and Thomas begins to dream about someone in a laboratory. He wakes up terrified and sees that Albie has come out of the forest even though he is not a runner. And Newt understands that Albie is the one who understands what he is doing the most, because the first one came to the forest and had to live alone for a month without speaking to anyone or anything. He understands what is happening, but after each month passes, he begins to understand that the most important thing is trust and order, and they all remain sitting and waiting for the runners to come back. But one time, they were late in returning, and all the young men gathered in front of the gate, waiting for them. Until it's time to close the gate, Mino and Albie have not yet arrived, but Albie appears to be injured and unable to walk, so Mino is carrying it, and this is what delayed his return, and all the young men are encouraging him so that he can hurry, so he can enter the forest before the gate closes. Thomas is forced to run towards them, perhaps to help them pass the night, and nothing will happen to them, and they will all be trapped in the maze, and Albie will be unconscious because he is bitten. They begin to think about how they will pass the night and hide from the Grievers, and they try to hide the Albie in the planting on the fence before the Grievers reach them, and they continue to raise it to some extent until he realizes that the Grievers are starting to approach him and is forced to let Thomas down and leave him and run away. Thomas tries to hide under the same precaution and digs himself into the plantings and finds the Grievers with iron legs, and he stays hidden for a while until the Grievers move away from the place and tie the rope of the Albie to the ground. And he begins to move in the maze until he finds a sticky substance coming down on his shoulder from above, and the Grievers are there. He begins to run away from it and climb around the corner in order to complete his escape. He manages to knock the Grievers into the plant and paralyzes his movement until he escapes from it. He finds Mino in front of him, and he tells him that the maze will change and he must escape from this Grievers. But Thomas stops once and keeps waiting for the Grievers to see him. He runs towards him and is able to make the station close on the Grievers and kill him. And in this way they succeed in living until the next day, and as soon as the gate opens, Chuck is waiting for them in the hope that they are still alive. And after he loses hope, they appear in front of him carrying Albie, and they succeed in entering the forest. They say that they are saving Albie's life, and an emergency meeting is held for the whole forest, and Gailey is the one who speaks to them and demands that Thomas be punished for breaking the rules. But all the young men defend him, the first of whom is Mino, and those who say that he is the bravest person they have ever seen, and he would sacrifice himself to save Albie, and that his opinion is that he is hostile towards them. But before they finish talking, they hear the sound of the box going out, and they are all surprised that this box has arrived before its time. And they shout towards it and find in it a girl present in the box, passed out, and in her hand is a paper on which is written that she is the last one who will reach them, and with superiority. The girl says Thomas's name, and then she faints again. They understand that there is something between them, and they take her to a place where she can rest. Thomas decides that he must return to the maze again. He might find anything new in the dead Grievers. He goes with Mino and gathers some young men to help him, because the majority of the runners, they refused to enter the maze again because of their fear of the Grievers, and they ran towards the dead Grievers, and they found that the Grievers had a device, as if it was permissible to transmit, and the number 7 was written on it, and they returned with it to the forest, and Newt thought that the letters on the device were the same letters that were on the supplies that he comes to them in the box, and they start guessing who is sending them food. The same people who made the Grievers, and as usual, the one who objects most to what Thomas is doing is Gailey, who wants him to be punished and imprisoned, and because Newt is still in charge of the forest, he decides to imprison Thomas in the hole one day after sunset as punishment for violating the rules, and he tells them that Thomas from tomorrow he will be a maze runner, and will he have freedom? He goes out at ease, and before Thomas goes to the hole, they take Mino to show him the runner's headquarters and the miniature design of the maze, and he tells him that a year ago they knew that there was no way out of the maze, but they had to hide from the rest of the guys to give them hope that they could get out, and so that their frustration does not spread. They lose hope that they will ever get out of this place, But he also tells him that there are 8 gates at the end of the maze. Each gate has a different number on it, and every night the maze changes. A different gate opens from the one before it, and so on. And before he continues speaking, Chuck interrupts his speech and tells them the girl has grown up and is causing problems, and no one knows how to talk to her until Thomas goes to her, and she is hiding on top of the tower. When she hears someone and Thomas tells her that he wants to talk to her, she allows him to come to her and tells him that her name is Teresa and she doesn't remember anything else, and Thomas explains to her that they are all healthy and in the same condition. While they don't remember anything, he also tells her that he sees her in his dreams. And all I remember is that there is someone who says the phrase, "Wicked is good," and she tells Teresa that she also dreamed about him, and she brings out 2 tubes with substances in them from her pocket and tells him that she found them with her. And he thinks that this substance can be treated for ALBI, and they go to give it to ALBI. It can be treated, and the night comes, and it is Thomas is supposed to spend the night in the hole for the next day. And Chuck brings him his own food and drink because he has a lot of running the next day. Then the day comes and Thomas and Mino start running towards the gates that he knows the way to, and they reach the 7 gates. But I am surprised that the menu is open at other times than usual. And Thomas listens. The device makes a sound every time they get closer to the gate, as if it is guiding them to the right path. And they continue to walk following the sound coming from the device, and it increases every time they get closer and encounter a gate that is open for the first time. And the red light in the device turns green and a new place opens in front of them, and a laser emerges from that place. And the gate begins to close in their face, as if she had read that there was a stranger in the place, and as if this gate was waiting for the Grievers who were carrying the device, not the 2 of them, and they kept fleeing the place before it closed on them. The order of the whole place changes completely until they succeed. They reach the forest, and there is Teresa waiting for them to inform them that Albie has recovered and is being treated for the Griever's bite. They go to him and Albie tells them that he remembered everything and there is no way out of the maze, and they will all die in it, and that Thomas was working with Wicht, which is their favorite. Also, he continues to cry and they all hear that there is an unusual movement in the forest and the night is approaching for them to enter. But the gate does not close as usual, and suddenly they find that the gates of the forest are opening for the first time from all directions, and the Grievers appear in front of them and attack all the people in the forest and Thomas, and, with him, they are trying to hide from the Grievers until the Grievers are able to catch Chuck and they go towards him. But Albie sacrifices himself to save him and gets from the Grievers the poison injection with which he is stung. Before Albie withdraws from the Grievers, he asks Thomas to save the rest, and Thomas decides to give me the same injection. Then, Tracy gives him the serum to restore his memory, and he remembers what happened and begins to see visions of an experiment laboratory in which he worked with Teresa, and they used to see people dying in front of them, and when they objected, they were banished to the forest, and he woke up from the coma he had been in. He finds himself locked in the hole with Teresa, and Mino and Newt tell him that the Grievers, after killing a number of them, returned to the maze again, and Glade took control of the forest and convinced everyone that he hears what he says, and whoever opposes him will be expelled from the forest at sunset with Thomas, and Thomas begins to tell them that whoever remembers that they are not in a forest or a prison, these countries are in the Wick test, and we have all been locked in their laboratories since we were young as infidels and experiments until the number of people in the laboratory began to decrease because Wicht was sending them to the maze, except for him and Teresa because they were employees at the same time. And they are the reason for what happened. It happens. But I obeyed his words, telling him that it didn't matter. What was he? The important thing now is that they get out of the maze, and so that Albie does not die without any benefit. Glade intends to offer them as sacrifices to the Grievers so that they may be saved, and Wicht may forgive them. The maze gate closes on them again, but Thomas is so sleepy that he hits the one holding him, and they all turn on Glade and tell him that continuing in the forest is suicide, and that at least their presence in the maze gives them a chance to survive, even if only a small one. Thomas and those who join him begin to move through the maze and reach the 7 gates. After they arrive, they find the Grievers protecting the gate, and they all attack him so that they can enter the gate because it is their only hope. They succeed in killing him and getting rid of him, but a large number of Grievers appear to prevent them from entering the gate until it is established. They succeed in opening the gate and entering it, and they find that caution descends on the Grievers and eliminates them. They find themselves in a long corridor in front of them and a door with the exit written on it, through which they enter and find themselves in the laboratory, where they find everyone has been killed, as if there was a massacre inside. And Newt sees that the forest was full of cameras to monitor them, and Thomas presses buttons and plays a video of Dr. Eva introducing herself, Director of Operations in the Department of Global Disaster Protection, and that she is recording this video of the young people who succeeded in passing the maze test, and that they were in a test to ensure their ability to coexist with the new world. And this is because the known world is being burned by the sun, and billions of people died, and then a virus spread that affects the brain. It is similar to the virus that was contained in the creatures of the cliff, but with time a new side appeared capable of overcoming the virus, and that everything they were in was an environment prepared to experiment with the virus and treat it on them, and to study their brain activities, so they might find a reason why this generation is different and capable. They are the virus, but despite everything they were hearing, there were people who opposed their policies, and she ordered their liquidation, and Eva tells them that if they saw this video, she would have committed suicide, and she would pull out a gun and shoot herself with fire in front of them in the recording, and they would look and find someone dead in front of them, and the door in front of them would open so they could get out. Before they go outside, they find that Glade is next to them and has a gun. He is stung and preventing them from leaving. He tells them that no one will live, and they will all die soon, and that Thomas is the reason for everything that happened. Mino tries to kill Glade with a spear in his shoulder, but she gets out. The gun is expensive, and Chuck sacrifices himself so that Thomas does not die, and Chuck dies between the hands of Thomas, and they find that there are people who come to save them from the place they are in, and they go out to a place that looks like a desert, and they ride in a helicopter and see the shape of the maze from above, and it becomes Dr. Eva Aisha, and all that happened in this laboratory. It was a play to make the maze youth trust more, and thus begin the second stage of experiments on the youth, showing what the outside world looks like, and it is truly destructive.